So Melissa now left the same day to that meeting. And the information you got was that he did not convey a positive message.
Yes, that the message, and fortunately, Muhammad Afe is still alive, because by the time he went to brief President Moi and was trying to tell Moi about the success story of the process, what Moi apparently shut him up, that that's not what he got out of the Arusha Congregation of African Presidents. And also the impression we got back from headquarters. And some of these became problems for David Stephen. It was part of why David Stephen was redeployed, because they felt that he had become too involved and wasn't putting it as, but okay, we can go to other issues. What were you also going to ask?
Yes, that's interesting, really. So basically, the Somalis have felt that Ethiopia never accepted that reconciliation, and it showed the same day of the inauguration. There was also the ambassador, the American ambassador in Djibouti. The rumors were saying that she was not satisfied with the outcome, or Abdulqasim and his team. What information did you have on that?
Well, I think that she, okay, quite a number felt that the election of Abdulqasim was not the best that it could be. But the same American ambassador that you are talking about normally says perfect is the enemy of the good. That you cannot expect everything to be so perfect from the first day. However, for her, there is a difference between seeing what was being put together as a government as opposed to an administration. In which case, over time, the Abdulqasim could live up to being a government as opposed to an administration. But President Gele didn't see it that way. President Gele felt that Abdulqasim should be accepted as the president of Somalia, and assist him to rebuild. We, as the UN Political Office for Somalia, took that same position and provided all the support and advice and suggestions that we could. But it was also not easy to get President Abdulqasim Salat Hassan to accept that he is a president of a sort, and that he should gradually, without the arrogance that he also started displaying, that he should gradually walk himself into it. Well, it was possible to sit him at the credentials committee in New York at the GA. It was also possible, with the support of the UN Political Office for Somalia, to sit him at the Organization of African Unity in Zambia. the the last meeting of the OAU that transited to the African Union when they subsequently met in Durban. But he started exhibiting the African, I am in charge, I am the president here.
He thought he was a real president, you're saying?
Yes, he started, well, no, I will not even say that he wasn't a real president. The problem is that Somalia had collapsed, and it was the only example in the world in which people allowed total collapse. All the others, you still had a president pretending somewhere and saying, I am in charge. Even look at Yemen. Yemen had been managed on. There was the old man that they took into Saudi Arabia, and as the Houthis were claiming to be in. But in the case of Somalia, everything was let go. And so, and as Boutros Ghali pointed out, we do not have experience on how to rebuild such a situation. And it's still part of what is haunting Somalia till today. That in spite of the fact that the Atta peace process achieved something significant, and that is that it was possible to bring all the warlords and faction leaders into a situation of a government and its opposition. So Abdel Qasim was accepted as the government along the line by the international community, even if the international community was doing its best to derail his efforts and finding who and who among those that went to Atta that would play that role. Shati Gadud was with us in Arta, only for him to surface in Addis Ababa and started talking he wants to build Rahanwein land. It doesn't have anything to do with, and Abdullah Yusuf saying he never really cared whatever happened in Arta, that Puntland is solid on its own, and that it's not possible to talk about Somalia peace if you don't have Igal on the table, and Igal doesn't want to come. So it was kind of like...
sorry to interrupt you again. The talks you had with Colonel Abdullah Yusuf, you had them in Puntland, isn't it?
We met Abdullah Yusuf in several places as UN Political Office for Somalia, but it was mainly in Puntland until he came to Nairobi under the auspices of the other one, this whatever it is called, the Mbagati process that started in Eldoret.
What were his requests? What did he want? What were the demands he was putting forward?
To the best of my knowledge, Abdullah Yusuf was saying that there should be an overall reconciliation that settles the problem of Mogadishu as the capital of Somalia and restitution of properties that had been seized in southern Somalia to the original owners as part of an overall reconciliation process.
And that's what he said on Arte, yeah? That was his conditions for joining Arte?
No, Abdullah Yusuf was saying, I am in Puntland. If we are going to talk about Somalia, Mohammed Ibrahim Igal should be on the table with us. The status of Mogadishu should be solved. Property restitutions to original owners to take place. So he was more of building blocks, which was probably could reasonably be said to be an Ethiopian position. Also, along the line, it did not that it started as an Ethiopian position, because many of these things changed and people started having these answer and whatever. The building blocks Ethiopia put forward to the international community before Gele Initiative. So it was like Gele Initiative undermined the building blocks, because Gele was talking about an overall settlement within a Somali framework of reconciliation that got everybody together. Huh? And then Abdul Qasim emerged from that. But Abdul Qasim was not able to go beyond, I have been elected as the president. Abdul Qasim was not able to now find a way of calling a meeting of all and speaking to his own people on how do we give back the properties, especially of the Darods in Mogadishu. Omar Mualim was living from hand to mouth in Nairobi. Late Omar Mualim, the first ambassador to Washington, first this, first that. He was living on handouts from international friends. But he was having 4 or 5 villas in Mogadishu that he could not go anywhere near. And so all these were things that we hoped, David Stephen and I hoped, would be addressed by the president as he starts getting support from here and there. In fairness to him, no support was forthcoming either, because the international community were not excited about the way Gele largely kept them out of it until he finally said, okay, but it should be commended that he could even go back into Mogadishu. So he went back to Mogadishu, and he made some major mistakes. For instance, his first visit was to Egypt. We had suggested that he should go to Ethiopia and seek to get convince Ethiopia that he would take care of their security concerns. But it's also possible that he was getting alternative information compared to what we were getting. So the Ethiopians also started seeing him as part of the problem. And all that led to the new peace process. The transitional national government started waning. And
if we can go back to Arte. President Gele invited all the warlords. Were they officially invited, or that was just informally or on the media? Were there any invitations handed over to them to come to Djibouti?
We must be fair to President Gele. Initially, he did it the way I said, but later he accepted to send Djibouti delegations into Somalia. Because many people accused him of starting something about Somalis behind their backs by going to the United Nations to talk without, first of all, going into Somalia and consult with the Somalis. Just as the international community was saying, it didn't consult with them either. So he sent delegations that went all over. My assumption is that, not that I have it concrete, that those delegations extended the invitation to the warlords or faction leaders, as we call them.
Did they have any conditions? They wanted to come to the meeting as heads of delegations, and they did not want to sit down with people representing the civil society. Was that the case?
You've mentioned that problematic word I've been avoiding, civil society. That was a major problem for us on the ATA process. What is civil society in Somalia? It's something that Igal also cautioned against, that when you are saying civil society, what does it mean? The religious leaders, the traditional leaders, or the bunch of people in Mogadishu who were calling themselves civil society with support from the international community, as everything had broken down. So there were difficulties in dealing with all this. However, the faction leaders had been enjoying the prime of place because they controlled the guns. They had the power. The clans gave support to their militia. They provided the men who stepped forward. They got paid for the technicals that are being used, belonging to. So if they can rampage here and there and gather money and the clan, they can continue to hold sway. Now, you want to stop that. That's confrontation. So you need a lot of tact to be able to stop that. And I believe President Gele tried, but it wasn't easy to reach the conclusion that they will willingly vacate power and say we are no longer interested. I remember Gebiu. Gebiu had been ejected from the Kismayo area. And whatever he owned in all that places, talking about how can he go to any meeting that before that is given back to him. So there are several different positions. There wasn't a meeting of warlords saying we have all agreed that we will not participate. Every individual had their own position as to why they are not going to ATA, and they were looking for alternative places to go to.
Now, let me ask you this question. There are people who say, had the low warlords, the faction leaders come to ARTA conference, there would have not been a government emerging from that process. What do you think?
I would say it's reasonable to think that way because of all the earlier experiments with the warlords or the faction leaders that had failed to provide any solution. It had started with Ali Mahdi Muhammad and Muhammad Farah Aidid. And with the death of Farah Aidid, nothing changed. The problem continued. So it is right to think that it's not something we can prove, that if the warlords came, there wouldn't have been the election that produced a president. It's an assumption. Because you can also say that when it came to the Kenyan process that had them seated, although, as I said, by that time, things had become more of a government and opposition. So it was like Abdul Kazim having to face a, what do they call it? A re-election, not re-election, facing a process to recheck his mandate. And Abdullah Yusuf won, and power technically was granted to Abdullah Yusuf. That came out of Atta. The fact that things had become not the different warlords sitting down, but whether if you had the warlords at the place and you had the clans and everything, that there wouldn't have been the kind of election that we had, I don't know. It's we cannot repeat to be sure that that is, yeah.
Was there any way we could have avoided the Mbagathi conference in ARTA process? I mean, was there any things that you would consider would have changed the fate of the TNG ending up in Mbagathi and being overrun by?
I would rather want to see the situation as an evolutionary one, that we had to have an ARTA process before we can have an Mbagati process. And the Mbagati process came out of the inability of the transitional national government to govern. Yes, we had a president in Mogadishu. The president is not doing the kind of things you expect states to do, or government as the manifestation of the state to start doing, issuing passports, providing even the register of births and deaths. That wasn't happening. Nothing concrete. You aren't having the police that everybody had confidence in. Even if it would mean police in Puntland working with the police in Mogadishu to have the semblance of a single command structure. So we defined somebody as the president of the country, but he couldn't go beyond his immediate clan or even sub-clan in Mogadishu, or even sub-clan. Because how do you explain him and Osman Ato and Hussein Aidid and all the rest of it in not accepting that we have a president properly so-called, we are the same Habagidr, let's, you have it now, move forward. He had the support of people like Ulus. But beyond that, it was far and between. It was ourselves. We didn't have money. Those who have money were not giving him money. All we could get are some paltry of support from UNDP in terms of the peace dividend that everybody expected should follow, that could have also supported his capacity to govern. But on hindsight, maybe he could have, with Djibouti, sought alternative sources of funding from the Gulf, as opposed to the focus on the European Union, etc.
Professor, thank you very much for your time. We are at the end of our interview. You have been involved in the Somali political reconciliation, peace building, state building for quite some time. And of course, a lot of things happened after you have left. But that experience and the experience you had in similar situations of conflict, what would you advise? What advice would you give to the Somali people in general and to the youth in particular?
That's a tough question. One that I am not in a position to answer, because that would be like wanting to play God. Because as I said earlier on, no other country was allowed to fall totally apart. And Boutros Ghali recognized that problem and called on the world that the Charter does not allow him. You cannot, for instance, as some Somalis were saying, let the UN revitalize the trusteeship council and UN take over the trusteeship over Somalia. But the Charter of the UN is against that. So you could not then say that we are going to turn Somalia into a trust territory and we are going to get everybody to. So the world decided that we will live with Somalia as is. Yes, if there are terrorists there, we go, especially the United States, and perhaps some of its coalition of the willing, we go up there and bomb them. We will have to live with whatever is on the ground. I think maybe even Ethiopia itself is not as gung-ho anymore about the fact that everybody has come to see that yes, it's probably cheaper to be having these, and something that I left out of what we are saying so far was a speech that President Moi made after office in Washington to the US Military Academy. And he said that none of the neighbors of Somalia would be happy to see it back on its feet. Because when Somalia was on its feet, Somalia gave the entire sub-region a lot of headache in trying to have greater Somalia. And that if it comes back to its feet, it will repeat the same thing. And so I remember that somebody took that statement to Meles Zenawi and asked for Meles Zenawi's reaction to what former President Moi had said in Washington.
Interesting. What did he say?
Meles Zenawi said, well, I don't know the basis for the response of former President Moi, but he's not speaking for Ethiopia, and he's not even able to speak for Kenya because he's no longer in office to speak for Kenya. So it's a mute question to be asking me was his reaction to what Moi was reported to have said, documented in the newspapers in the period, with Moi not denying that he didn't say so or whatever. And when you look at the actions of the neighbors, there are several political, and some of it is playing out right now between Ethiopia and Egypt, and the relationships that they are building over Somaliland and the rest of Somalia and whatever. I stopped trying to think about what is going, because I was going insane in another country, and I was wanting to know what was happening in Somalia. I need to be involved in what was going on in Somalia. I did that throughout my period in Liberia, and I got to Guinea-Bissau, and I still wanted to know what was happening in Somalia. I said, no, I'm going crazy. I have to start reducing that passionate involvement, that yes, it should be possible to get something going. So if you ask me now, what am I going to say? I have been, I left Somalia 2006. So much had taken place. So much hope had been built. So much effort that you start saying maybe the Somalis are about to get it, in spite of the problems with Al-Shabaab and whatever. But even then, they continue to fight over you president, you don't want to go. You will come back and be president, and me, I am prime minister. I'm not dealing with whatever you are saying, and parliament. I don't know, to be honest with you. People themselves must wake up and have a serious dialogue with themselves, that they should not, they cannot continue to be the last on almost all indices of human performance. Not the fact that because there was a time they were making a law that telephone is cheaper in Somalia, using technology and all the rest of it, and some people are making their money and happy with some of this. But the fact of the matter is, Somalis in general remain orphans. It's a lot that they must be going through on the continent and the world at large, because I know what I go through as a Nigerian, so I can try to imagine what a Somali would be going through in the world. Can we do things better? Definitely. But where is that hope going to come from? You mentioned the youths. I'm not conversant with what they are doing of late and what role they can play, because it seems that Africa across the board lacks leadership. Across the board, I cannot say where you can say that, yes, we have leadership that is worth the salt in Africa. So whether the youths are able to go beyond all that and change things, I honestly don't know um, uh, where that counter elite amongst the youths will come from to transform the situation. But we must not give up hope. And I know that efforts like yours are because you are not giving up hope, that let's see what can we learn from the past to build for the future. We cannot continue to call reconciliation conferences upon reconciliation conferences. Yes, we are managing that there is a parliament and there is a presidency how do we get those ones to start providing services where they are, that others start saying that, oh, the services that you are providing in Mogadishu, if you can provide it also in Baidoa, what does it take? And then you link together and provide the same services in Baidoa. And you now start saying there is a repository of services. All that can be done easily with technology today. But yes, somebody has to pay for that. How do you collect taxes as a government when you are not a warlord, that you know that if you don't pay, the technicals will visit you? These are fundamental issues that need to be thought through, or to see if you can win back people into supporting the idea.
Professor Femi, I really appreciate the time you've given us, and I hope that our audience, the Somali people in general and the youth in particular, will learn a lot from your wisdom and the stories you shared with them. Thank you very much.
Yes, before, it's been nice reminiscing. You made me consult my notes and everything, and I appreciate the opportunity to see if I can still make contribution from my not too tired retirement. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're most welcome. Thank you.